And we're back with a new episode of the Dreamers Comics Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Spahi, and today we have a very mysterious guest. Dirk Manning, comic book writer for Tales of Mystery, Right or Wrong, Nightmare World from Image Comics. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Right on. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, exciting. So I wanted to ask you, how did you kind of get started creating comics? What was your foray into the world of comic book creating?
Oh gosh, therein lies the tale. No, I actually am probably a little bit different than a lot of people that got into comic books. I actually didn't start getting into comic books till I was really a teenager. I was a metal kid, a skater kid, and always a voracious reader. And one of the big draws to me for comic books was when I found out that there's new content every month for things you like. And that was a really big draw to me. And I was in a skateboard shop one time, and I went in the skateboard shop, it was like 13, and he had a giant rack of comics. He just started carrying comic books, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is, new stuff every month. This is great, because I was, again, I'd go to the library and burn through books the librarians knew me on a first name basis. So that was a big initial draw to it. And the other big piece of it then became just a storytelling format. And that's what got me involved wanting to make comics, is some of the earliest comics I read were, I really started, again, kind of an unusual way. Three of the first comics I read were Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, and then The Crow by James O'Barr.
Oh wow, those are all kind of adult books?
Yeah, those were power hitters. Because once, I dabbled in a couple of books before that, like Peter David's Run the Hulk, but when some of the other older metal, the cool kids at school, found out that I was reading comic books. They're like, no man, here, read this Watchmen and read this and read this. So I got hooked on that pretty early. And Watchmen especially, the way the story was told, the juxtaposition of the words and the pictures and all these storytelling devices that became very evident to me very quickly. You could only tell a story that way with a comic book.
Absolutely.
And the juxtaposition of the words and the pictures. And Harvey Pekar said, comics are words and pictures, and you can do anything with words and pictures. And that then kind of really changed my life. I was a writer before then. I wrote a lot of fiction and things like that, and I realized that there's so much stuff you can do with this medium that I've never turned back.
Yeah. And what was your first work in comic books? Did you start writing for different press sites, or were you kind of just like, okay, I'm going to try to take a shot at writing some scripts?
Yeah, I started in music journalism really heavily when I started college. I knew I wanted to write comics, but I also knew I wanted to find my own voice, and I wanted to come out of the box really strong. And that was important to me. So I was doing music journalism, entertainment journalism, things like that. And all the time just studying comic books. I was reading different comics, picking them apart. You read Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. I think a really long lost forgotten gem was Warren Ellis did a column years ago called Coming Alone. And Warren Ellis has always been kind of a futurist, and he would talk a lot about the medium and things like that. But then my first, from there, I parlayed it into comic book journalism, doing stuff for Newsarama. For years, I did a column there called Right or Wrong. Eventually we collected all that into a book. But this was a guide for people that wanted to write comics but couldn't draw. And I always said early on, I've always been a pay-it-forward person. And I've always said, if I ever got to the point where I was making comics, I would do everything I could to help other people.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to be a grinder. I knew I was a guy, and again, I talk about this a lot in the book about how, early on I tried to do the things where I weaseled my way into an interview with Axel Alonso, who was at Vertigo at the time, for Flinch, the horror anthology, because I'm kind of a horror guy as well, and stuff like that. But I realized pretty early on, if I was going to really have a run in comics, I was going to have to grind it out. And long story short, then my first comic book became Nightmare World, which is a horror anthology series. And this is my first book I ever did.
Who were your collaborators on that?
Well, again, it's one of those things that it's interesting because what I did was Nightmare World is a horror anthology series. Mm-hmm. And throughout the whole series, there's 52 stories. Each story, and they're each 8-page stories, written by me and illustrated by a different artist or art team. And all the standalone stories eventually, as you read the whole series, weave into one giant story.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, but collaborator-wise, I was working with a lot of different artists that I met online and that wanted to do comics. I said, hey, you want to draw comics? I want to write comics. Why don't we do an 8-page story together? You know, and it's the old dating before marriage thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when there's people that want to make comics and things like that, I think I talk about this a lot in the Right or Wrong book. The mistake a lot of people make is, I got this idea for this story. It's a 100-issue epic about, you know, space ninja zombies, and then poof, the artists, quote unquote, flake out.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because you're trying to get them to commit to this massive project.
Yeah. 12 years later, ask for a huge commitment and say, hey, listen, I can't pay you, or I'm not going to pay you for whatever.
Right.
Or even then, even if you're paying them a boatload of money, it's like if they're not invested in the project, they have to live with that art forever.
Exactly. So what I did with Nightmare World is we did 8-page stories, you know, and one of the things there's 2 things I'm exceptional, okay, 3 things I'm exceptionally proud of with this series. Maybe more, but this is my first ever comic series. It was one of the first ever comic books that was fully published online back in 2002. So, I mean, it's an older book, you know, I mean, the content, but when you actually, you know, look through the content, I mean, I still sell this book on my table to this day, and it's one of my highest sellers. This book went on, we published it online for years, just self-published it online. And I was working with a bunch of artists from a studio called Golden Goat Studios, among others. A lot of the artists now have gone on to work for Marvel, DC, Image, things like that, IDW, I mean, across the board. The book eventually, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, was initially picked up by Image Comics through Shadowline. We then eventually transitioned over to its new home at Devil's Due Comics out of Chicago. And we then ran a Kickstarter to collect all 4 graphic novels in one giant omnibus, because the whole series was intended to be 4. Image Comics published the first 3 volumes, but never published the 4th one. And I left Image, again, very amicable. Jim Valentino was very supportive of it. But the model changed, and me being a guy that never wrote for Marvel, never wrote for DC, and going straight to the trade paperback wasn't a viable model at Image. So went over to Devil's Due, and I told everybody, I was using social media and everything else. I do about 30 conventions a year, so I kind of have this underground following, or underworld if you're a horror guy. Is we did a Kickstarter, and for the 4th volume, and a collected omnibus, and raised, we had a $13,000 funding goal that I could put together a hardcover omnibus of all 4 books. We hit that in 3 hours and 13 minutes.
Wow, that's incredible.
On Friday the 13th. So my fans are awesome, you know, that my readers really did that.
I love it.
And we ended up raising over $45,000 to do the omnibus.
Wow. What was the secret to the success? And like, because I know if you were, you know, I know that having the content in advance and having fans in advance definitely helped. What was the driving force in getting people to the Kickstarter so soon?
I do about 30 conventions a year, give or take, or in signings, and a lot of it's just that grind, you know, getting out there, connecting with people. I believe in this book. I believe in this book exceptionally, and it's really good. But oftentimes when you're doing creator-owned content, you have to break the stigma that just because you're not with a Marvel or a DC, or even an Image, I was with Image and left Image, that doesn't invalidate the quality of the work. So me getting out there and hand selling this book and just talking to people about it and saying, hey, here's this book. If you come to my Table A convention, you're gonna see primarily horror books. And everything's set up face out, and I have, I think, 15 books at my table at this point, and graphic novels. And people will come by and they'll look at my table and they'll know I'm interested in that or I'm not. So connecting with people to get them hyped up and just making those hand sales. And yeah, then when we launched that omnibus, I mean, it blew up. So.
Absolutely. And then after that, you did the Tales of Mr. Reed.
Yes. Tales of Mystery is. Oh, go ahead. I apologize.
No. I'm curious just how that came to be. What was the process with getting Tales of Mr. Reed to come to life? Yeah,
this is a horror noir series. This is actually a spin-off of Nightmare World. Nightmare World sports graphic novels next to the whole series. So I say that kind of use a geek reference. Nightmare World's The Hobbit. Tales of Mysteries, Lord of the Rings. This is a bigger, longer version, except for with a lot more monsters. The setup on this book, with Nightmare World being a horror anthology, the setup on Tales of Mystery is a little bit different. It's hell invades Earth for 3 days, and then it just stops. And people think, okay, well, that was pretty horrible. But it was 3 days, we made it through, we can move on. Well, Mystery is a magician who knows there's still monsters and demons left, and that 3-day invasion was really just the first wave of what's actually coming next. He's a magician. So the thing with Mystery is he's a monster hunter. There's a million books about monster hunters out there. I mean, whether it's, Hellblazer or The Goon or Hellboy, the monster hunter trope's been done to death. And personally, and I'm a fan of all these books, but as a horror fan, one thing always bothered me. How do these guys sleep at night? How do they function? John Constantine's a cool character. Hellboy's a cool character. The Goon's a cool character. But if I knew that there were monsters and things like that out there, I don't know how I would function.
Yeah.
How do you make friends? How do you work a job? How do you have any social interaction?
Yeah, You'd be so anxious and have worry all the time that the world was always coming to an end and that they were coming after you.
Right, and now let's take that one step farther. Let's say the world did come to an end for 3 days. It was the biblical Armageddon. There was monsters and demons everywhere, and everyone knows it. But now everyone's convinced it's done. And now they're convinced it's done, they don't want to hear the possibility that there might still be something else to it.
Yeah.
So you get this real Kafkaesque kind of, Invasion of the Body Snatchers almost, where you got Mystery, this guy who, he knows there's more to it. And no one wants to believe him. And kind of the prevailing message in society in this book is, if you're one of those people that really believes that the 3 days of darkness is still like an impact on our lives, maybe you're sick. Maybe you need help. Maybe you have PRADS. You have post-rapture adjustment disorder syndrome. But that's okay. We have a place we can put you. It's a very nice hospital. It's very safe, and we'll keep you safe there and adjusted. So, to me, that's a much more horrifying aspect of the book than the fact that there still are monsters lurking around, and that the Armageddon, the initial invasion was just the first phase of this guy who is completely emotionally isolated, socially isolated, and yet he's the guy that's right, and he knows the truth.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the gestation of that series for me was, what would that really be like,
That's fun.
Through it. Yeah.
And how many volumes is that?
4 volumes right now. We just had, again, a very successful Kickstarter. And we wrapped up Act 1 with Volume 4. And some of my collaborators on Nightmare World, who again, we did 8-page stories together, have jumped in and done the different volumes of Tales of Mystery with me. So again, it was that dating before marriage that, we did 8-page stories together, and now they're doing, Josh Ross, who's one of the most prolific Nightmare World artists, did all of Volume 1. Seth the Moose did all of Volume 2 and Volume 4. But we just wrapped up Volume 4, now in comic book shops everywhere, and Amazon.
I love it.
And we're gonna keep going next. And
so I want to talk real quick about the board game that
Yes.
was funded on Kickstarter, Mystery Saving the Nightmare World.
Yeah.
How did that kind of come to be? Like, what was the idea to get that board game? Did you kind of go, hey, listen, I want to make this thing a board game, or was it or did they come to you and go, hey, listen, we're a fan, we want to make this? What was the process behind getting this made?
Greenbrier Games came to me. We just kind of met at different conventions again. You have to play to win kind of thing. So doing all the conventions, I met Greenbrier Games over some epic karaoke, and they came to me and had read Nightmare World and Tales of Mystery and really became just infatuated with the series. The idea that this horror anthology series and then this horror noir series paint this one big picture. Again, Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. And they came to me and said, how would you feel about making a game, a tabletop non-collectible card game based on the work? And very respectfully, because I had become friends with them at this point, I said, I'm not really interested in that. And they were kind of taken aback, because Greenbrier's a big company. They do, they do folklore, they do apocalypse. These aren't just, some jabronis that just came to me and, hey, we want to make a game, And I, why? And I told them, I said, no one would get it right. Nightmare World and Tales of Mystery are horror series. I don't want a book where it's 3 and I go save the day. I said that really would invalidate the concept of the work. And I'm a person that says no to things before I say yes. I say no to almost everything. The hotel, someone says, you want to complimentary breakfast? I'm like, no. Wait a minute, hold on. What's the conditions?
Yeah.
But So they said, well, if we were to do this game, and if we were to work with you on this game, could we tell you, can I just tell you the concept, the first rule? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And they said, well, the first rule of Mystery Surviving the Nightmare World would be the good guys can't win. They can only stop the bad guys from winning. And I'm like, tell me more. So the way the game is set up, and it's been getting just a lot of really, really strong reviews. I'm just super excited that people are reacting to the way they are. Is a multiplayer game. One person plays the good guys. Every other player plays the bad guys. And what happens is, if you're the good guys, you just have to stop the bad guys from each meeting their individual win condition. The catch is, each player that's a bad guy, and all the characters are villain, and all the characters are from Mystery and Nightmare World, obviously. They all have a win condition very specific to their agendas in the series, but they're all competing with each other. So the villains may initially seem to be on the same side, but then eventually one of them's got to try to break out and meet their own objective, and then the other one stop it. And the game goes 6 rounds for the 3 days and nights of darkness in the series.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a half-hour game tops, and usually one of the bad guys does win. So if you win as a hero, that's like super bragging rights.
Yeah, we did it. We stopped them.
Right. It's like, I got all you guys, but I think it's like, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I think there's like usually on average, the good guys can win about 25% of the time.
Okay.
So if you play the heroes and you win this game with your friends, I mean, you
Play the villain if you want to win.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. You really want to win, play the villain, but if you win as a hero, that's beast mode.
I love it. So one of my favorite looking books you have is Cthulhu Jr.
Yeah.
Cthulhu Jr. just looks adorable and just looks so cute. Tell me how you kind of came up with the adventures of Cthulhu Jr. and Dastardly Dirk.
Yeah, like I said, I do a lot of shows a year, which is kind of a prevailing element, I think, in my career. And oftentimes families come up to my table, and little kids come up and they're like, oh, Nightmare World. I'm like, you don't want to read that. Nightmare World's like PG-13, but still, So I really wanted to have a book that younger people could read. But I also didn't want to go against brand, the glory of doing creator-owned comics and not having a boss where I have to go and crank out scripts every month is I can get to do what I want. And this book is illustrated by Scoot McMahon, who I'd known, again, stop me if you heard this one, from the convention circuit. And with some of my work, there's a certain amount of humor infused in all the darkness and things like that, but I thought it'd be fun just to do a book that's funny, but also a book that is an all ages book. A lot of people say children's books are all ages books. And that really bothers me because, there are books for kids that, as a 40-plus-year-old man, I wouldn't read and enjoy. I wanted to write a genuinely all ages book. And that's what The Adventures of Cthulhu Jr. and Dastardly Dirk is. And it's funny, even with Scoot drawing this, Scoot mainly draws kids' books. And he's like, yeah, this isn't quite really like just a kid's book. And I said, yeah, it's an all ages book. But it's about a wannabe supervillain who has to capture the son of Cthulhu to be admitted into the League of Evil. And obviously the villain has a certain resemblance to someone else But this, as well as Hope and Cosa Nostra, are 3 co-creator-owned books. The other thing that was really important to me is that if we did this book together, we would co-own it. But then it was funny because creating Dastardly Dirk, I couldn't have Scoot own half of me.
Yeah.
So, we give him like a purple scarf and things like that. And, he's probably a little better looking than I am. But yeah, it's an all ages book, and I think that's important that we continue to have those books that are available for people.
Of course. And what was your kind of process getting into like your next creator-owned project, like with Hope and Cosa Nostra? Like, how did those kind of come to be?
Hope is a story I've wanted to tell for a really, really long time. And I had auditioned over the years more artists for Hope than any other thing I've ever done, ever. People at my table, and again, see primarily horror stuff, even with Cthulhu Jr. and stuff, it still has a horror bent to it. And then people see Hope, and they're like, one of these things does not belong here. This is illustrated and co-created by Kaylin Smith. And people are like, oh, well, you're doing a superhero book. And I tell them, no, I'm not doing a superhero book. I'm doing a book about a superhero, which is very different. Hope is about a mom who, she's a woman, I'm sorry, she's not just a mom, she's a woman who is a mother. And she has a very, very unfortunate situation happen in the first couple pages of the book that really changed the trajectory of her life when she's outed as an ultra. And the book starts to look at, here's this woman who has these powers and volunteers as a superhero. And she gets in a car accident, and in the result of the car accident, to save her daughter and try to save her husband, she gets outed as a superhero. Or sorry, as an ultra, can't say superhero. And what happens from there is, a minor spoiler for people who haven't read it yet, her husband lands in a coma from the car accident, and Children's Services takes away her daughter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's just how it starts. And the book becomes really an examination of how we view celebrity, but also how we view women, and how we view motherhood, and how we view parents. And one of the big underlying, subtle, hopefully, themes of the book is, would they have taken her daughter from her if she was a man, and if the roles were reversed? It's probably my most horrifying book in a lot of ways. The fact about someone's child being taken from them. Kaylin Smith is a very accomplished writer and artist. She's done books including Plume, who's one of her biggest ones.
Yeah, she just had a Kickstarter not long ago to get the full omnibus done.
Yeah. In fact, at Devil's Due, the Nightmare Omnibus had the record for over a year and seemed to be an unbeatable record for Devil's Due until the Plume Omnibus, which I call the Plumnibus, came out, and she destroyed me, which was awesome. Kaylin is amazing. And with Kaylin and I both working at Devil's Due together for a while, I kind of, we got to know each other a little bit. And again, here I am this horror guy, and she just plumed this fantasy Western. And I finally talked to her, I said, I have this book I want to do, and I think you'd be really the right person to work with on this. And I gave her the script for the first issue, and she loved it. And we were talking about it, and she said, yeah, and what if? And she inserted this story element to it that was like, there it is.
You got it.
You are the one. And her art is just phenomenal on the book. So then it's we get to play off of the fact that, here I am, the horror guy, and then you have Kaylin Smith, the very sweet person versus me, the curmudgeonly old horror guy, and it works. It's two, it's chocolate vanilla swirl, like
Exactly.
It's two great tastes that taste great together.
I love it.
Yeah. So.
How did you come to be at Devil's Due? What was the process and kind of like getting Devil's Due to be interested in you as a creator? When it comes to like getting your books on, because you have a lot of books there.
Sure.
How did that relationship get formed?
Yeah. I think it was the same case with both Devil's Due as well as with Source Point Press. With both publishers that I've worked with or work with, in the sense that they see me out there grinding, and even with Image Comics back in the day, it was just about grinding, Nowadays, when you're doing creator-owned books, I think the situation is very different. A lot of people, and I talk about this in Right or Wrong. I'm doing another Right or Wrong volume, hopefully in February 2020. I just said that on record, so I'm really going to make sure it happens. Is that a lot of creators, when they're getting started, they really look for a publisher to do the work for them. And it's like, oh, I'm doing this book, Cosa Nostra, and now I'm a publisher, now I'm validated. That's not what it's about. The question is, the publisher will help give you the opportunity to do some of the legwork for you to get your book out there. But I think what a lot of publishers want now,
you do the work and build a fan base.
Right, you do the fan base, and then they will help you amplify your effort.
Of course.
And it was like that with Devil's Due. It was like that with Source Point Press. I mean, Source Point Press does, again, 30, 35 conventions a year. Going to Devil's Due from Image, they had the infrastructure to allow me to do the Kickstarter route. At the time, that was not something I was going to get a lot of support with from Image. Yeah. And again, that's not a diss on Image at all, but that was not their model.
Yeah.
Their model was they put out the book and you go do the work. I needed someone to help me with that Kickstarter model. And when I talked to Josh Blaylock, he was very invested in that idea, and he believed in it, and he knew my grind. He saw me out there all the time, and he goes, yeah, this guy will be, we'll make a run at this. And by the time I really started rolling on those Kickstarters, he just, they were able to support doing the little bit of stuff that maybe I didn't have the time or the expertise to do. Then working with SourcePoint Press, again, their convention presence is massive. It's unprecedented.
They're doing 35 shows a year. That's the show pretty much every weekend, every other weekend.
Right, and they probably do more than that even. I might be lowballing them because SourcePoint now is such a team that they'll do 2 or 3 conventions a weekend. They send a team out here, they send a team out there, and a team out there. That's also good for me to have books on their table, but then also to have that infrastructure about, the publicity they're offering, as well as then combined with my own efforts. I'm always kind of a little bit of a lone wolf, so I'm like Batman with the Justice League, it's like, I'm there, I'm a team player, but at the same time, I got Gotham to defend, I got 13 books or whatever I have, I gotta get out there to promote myself, so. And that's it, publishers, for any aspiring creators out there, the big thing you have to realize is a publisher may like your work, but they're also gonna wanna look at what's your social media footprint. Are you out there doing conventions? How do you talk to people? Before, back in the day, going full circle in a sense, before I could afford to do conventions as much as I do, because my conventions are all supported in my work now, MySpace made my career.
Mm-hmm.
Social media, people are like, what's a MySpace? Like, watch Iron Man 1. There's a MySpace reference, how far we've come. But then now it's been like Facebook and things like that, those social media platforms and getting out there and making people aware of your work in a non-spammy way and then parlaying that into, investing a little money in yourself. When I got started, and I'm never shy about talking about this, I worked 2 jobs when I started comics, not including comics.
Yeah.
I had my day job. Then I had an evening job. The evening job funded my comic book work. And people would ask me all the time, Dirk, what was the greatest moment of your life? What was the, and your knee-jerk reaction is always when you get your first book published. Mm-hmm. But I realized that wasn't it. It was when I realized that I could quit my second job because the comics were paying for themselves. And doing that and being out there and doing the work, to maintaining a social media presence where I'm not using social media as a pathological need for attention.
Yeah. You're doing it as a marketing tool to get through brand growth and
exactly.
And that stuff is super important.
Exactly. And that's and that allows you to then negotiate, maybe not from a position of power, but a position of equity with publishers. I know what I do and I know what I'm worth. And that's given me the point. And I know the impact I can have in sales. So that allows me to take a book like Cosa Nostra, which is a black and white ink washed supernatural mafia book, and say, this book is going to happen. Would you like to join forces to get it out there and make some money on it too? But that's 10 years in the making. The first thing is you build your brand on social media. I wish I would have had social media when I started to the extent we have it now. Get on the road, do regional shows, get out there, learn to pitch your books, learn to talk to people. It's not about buying editors' drinks. Mm-hmm. It's about doing the work and letting people know you do the work. And when people think of Dirk Manning, I want them to think of, that's the guy that does really cool creator-owned books. Most of them are kind of scary. Even the one about the superhero is pretty horrifying, but building that brand so that you can then go to a publisher and they'll say, hey, I've heard of you.
So I have a personal question for
you.
At what point did you feel like there was a struggle for you that you didn't know if you were going to be able to continue in comics? Because you said you were working 2 jobs, and was there ever a moment where it was like a low point for you in comics, and you said, maybe comics isn't for me. Maybe I should just pack it up and say, I shouldn't do this anymore.
Sure. I talk about this at length in Right or Wrong, the first Right or Wrong book, the only Right or Wrong book at the moment. But when I was just getting started, I had met my first artist, Brian Bendis. I grew up in Ohio, and Brian Michael Bendis was another journalist who grew up in Ohio in Winter Comics. And when I was first getting started on this journey, again, I kind of parlayed my way. I almost tricked my way in an interview with Axel Alonso at Vertigo, and I said, I know I can write. And I just told him, I said, I know I can write really, really well. What do I have to do to get into an anthology like Flinch, which was this old horror anthology at Vertigo? And I said, do I send scripts in? What do I do? And Axel Alonso told me, well, I won't read a script, but I'll read a comic. Find an artist to draw a script, and I would read it. I said, thank you, sir. So, but that's not true. I didn't say thank you. I said to him, I said, okay, well, I'm working right now. I'm just out of college. I really don't have a lot of money. I said, my problem is I don't have the ability to really pay an artist, what they need to draw a story. And he said something that changed my life. And he goes, now this is again a dated reference, but he goes, do you like music? I'm like, oh yeah. I said, I actually did music journalism for years. And he said, do you have a big CD, you have like a stereo or a CD collection? I go, yeah, actually I have a really nice stereo system, because I listen to my CDs on all the time. For those at home, CDs are those things you would put music on before you stole it from the internet. It was like on this piece of plastic and you listen to it that way. So I go, yeah, I got a lot of CDs. And he goes, oh, so you have money. It's just a matter of how you're spending it. Like, thank you.
Yeah.
I said, next time you see me, I'll have a comic. So long story short, I went to another convention and I went to talk to Brian Bendis. He had just launched this Spider-Man reboot of some sort. That was supposed to be a big deal.
Awesome.
That was Ultimate Spider-Man, right? It became this biggest thing, And he just launched Powers. And I talked to him and I said, hey, you're a guy from Ohio who started in journalism like I did, and you're writing comics. I want to do that. I said, how do you meet artists? And he directed me to his old gym school for him. And he said, hey man, man, I get it. And he goes, I'm there. I have a thread. You can go there. You can meet artists. Long story short, I met my first artist. We clicked. We were going to do a short story together. And I fell into a situation where I had to do a lot of home repair. I literally fell through the floor in my house. And I kind of flaked out for a while. I didn't get back to the artist. I was embarrassed. I had to get another, get a second job, do all this house repair and things like that. And then the next thing I know, I kind of get out of this financial mess I'm in, and I realize it's been about 6 months and I never emailed that artist back. I'm like, man, Dirk, you had your chance and you blew it. I emailed the artist anyway. About 6 months later or so, maybe longer than that, and I said, hey man, this is what happened to me. I apologize. I know we talked about doing a story together. And he said, look, I get it. Let's just move forward. We did. He drew the first ever Nightmare World story, and here we are. But I thought at that time, when everything was falling apart on me, that I was done. And what I tell writers and creators all the time, the most important thing is you will be tested in this journey. Stay in touch with people. Don't flake out. Just talk to people. If I was gonna pay you $400 to do a cover, and you're a higher end artist, and then all of a sudden my transmission goes out, I just have to go to you and say, look, man, I apologize. I still would like to work with you. I can't afford it at this time. I'd like to stay in touch, and then maybe we can revisit this later.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's it.
No, that's something really important. Is it's about people and it's about communication and just being upfront and realistic with there's nothing people haven't kind of seen before. And people get embarrassed and people
Right.
go, oh no, like my problems are the end of the world. I don't have a floor right now. And,
Right.
and people kind of always are going through something and you just don't know what it is. So you just kind of have to be patient and be respectful. And sometimes it can work with artist-writer or it can work with writer-artist where you're waiting for pages and go, hey, listen, is this going to happen or is this not going to happen?
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to do that.
Yeah. Just talk to people. People are people. If I quit making comic books tomorrow, one of the biggest takeaways that's been so amazing is the friendships I've got to make with so many amazing people.
Yeah.
Again, growing up in Ohio and now kind of almost living on the road, there are so many people that people all over the world. I have friends in Italy and Ireland and all over that I work with, I never would have met these people were not for comic books. And the relationships you get to have, and there's not to get all philosophical, but this journey of life and the friends you can make in this industry and things like that. And then sometimes you become friends with people that were your heroes, and then now they're your peers, and
That's
but the
our
key is
work.
just
Growth.
just communication. Just talk to people and enjoy the journey.
I love it. So I have one last question for
Sure.
you. What advice do you have for any aspiring creators, writers, artists? I know you have a whole book on it people can check out on Amazon.
Did I mention that?
What would you say? Like, what would be your number one piece of advice for people to kind of learn about how to make comics?
Whether you're a writer or an artist, you need to tell the story that you want to tell. When I started this journey with Nightmare World, it was in the early 2000s. Everyone everyone was telling me a horror book will never sell. Everyone was telling me writing it like an anthology will make sure it double never sells. I love horror. I love anthologies. That's what I wanted to do. Find the story that only you can tell. Find that thing that you believe in. A lot of people say, well, someday I'm going to do this book, and this is going to be like my book. This is going to be my passion project. Start with your passion project. Tell the story only you can tell. Brian Bendis talked years ago about when he first launched Powers. Alan Moore launched Top 10 about the same time. Those are two books, both about superhero police officers. And Brian Bendis talked about, like, oh my God, I thought my career was done. He goes, how could this, I'm launching this creator-owned book, and it's going to be like my big thing. And Alan Moore's doing the same concept. Oh my gosh. Powers and Top 10 are totally different books.
Yeah.
But you just have to, tell the story that you want to tell. It doesn't matter if it's about a woman who happens to be a mother of a superhero, or, a guy whose brother's in the mafia, or a horror anthology, or, horror noir. Again, Tales of Mystery. That's a book that everyone told me would never go anywhere. We have 4 successful Kickstarters under our belt. We have a nationally distributed game now. But people tell me, oh, a horror book about a person of color, that the first volume was black and white grayscale. And, and the thing I would hear most, especially Tales of Mystery, is when I was talking to different publishers initially was, it's just different. And they sound like a bad thing. And I said, I know. That's the point. It's the story I can tell. This is a Dirk Manning production, So find your passion, do your passion project. And if you believe in it, just be good to people along the way and enjoy the journey. And the success will be that you have a book. Maybe you'll sell 1 million copies. Maybe you'll go to print on demand and have 1 copy. But you made the book. Hopefully you had a good experience in making it. And people will identify with that. People will identify with, if you feel it and you believe it, you can sell it. That's what's going to get you. That's what's going to get you the best experience and the best chance of success.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and it's been a pleasure getting a chance to talk to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, man, very much. Appreciate your time.